If you've ever been the quiet one at family gatherings, the one they think doesn't notice, doesn't care, doesn't matter, then maybe you'll understand why I let it all slide for as long as I did. My name's James. I'm 29, live in a small but comfortable apartment in the city, work in tech, and I've never been the type to draw attention to myself. Not at school, not in the family, not even in relationships. I was the kid who colored inside the lines, did what was expected, and said thank you when I got hand-me-downs instead of birthday gifts. That was just the role I played in our family, the background noise to my brother's spotlight. My older brother, Darren, on the other hand, he was the golden child dipped in glitter. 2 years older, loud, charming in that shallow, Instagram-filtered way, and always had a new story about how amazing his life was going. According to him, he was a self-made businessman, owned multiple properties, and drove a BMW because he earned it. If you asked our parents, they'd nod along, sipping their wine like proud parents in a commercial. Never mind that I'd never actually seen one of these businesses, or that Darren still borrowed money from our parents every other month, or that his girlfriend, Kayla, the type who spoke only in sarcasm and selfies, once confused me with a waiter at my own cousin's wedding. That's not a joke. She actually handed me an empty champagne flute and said, "Could you be a doll and refill this?" Now, to really understand where this story starts, you have to understand the family dynamic. My parents always favored appearances over substance. They weren't cruel, exactly, just calculated. My mom hosted dinner parties with color-coded napkins, and my dad talked about networking more than he did about actual feelings. If you dressed well and smiled wide, you were welcome. If you were quiet and wore sneakers instead of loafers, you were a disappointment they politely tolerated. So growing up, I learned early to stay out of the way. I taught myself to fix things, computers, phones, the Wi-Fi, because that was the only time anyone really acknowledged me. I'd patch up Darren's gaming rig when it crashed, only to watch him take the credit for figuring it out when our dad asked. I got into coding during high school, started freelancing in college, and eventually landed a solid job at a mid-sized tech company after graduating. I didn't make a big deal of it. I never really talked about money or promotions or the fact that I saved enough to buy a car in full, not a flashy one, but reliable and mine. Because whenever I did try to share something good, it always got turned into a competition I never asked for. One Thanksgiving a few years back, I mentioned I'd gotten a raise. Darren responded, without missing a beat, "Only a raise? That's cute. I just closed a deal worth 6 figures." My mom beamed at him like he'd split the atom. My dad clapped him on the back. And I sat there, stirring lukewarm mashed potatoes, wondering why I even bothered. Fast forward to this year. Halloween. The party was being hosted at my parents' place, a big colonial house in the suburbs that looked like it came out of a real estate ad. It was their idea to throw a classy costume party, which basically meant everyone showed up in overpriced outfits and pretended they weren't judging each other. I wasn't planning to go at first. I'd spent the last few months keeping my distance. I was tired. Not physically, but soul deep. I was tired of being overlooked, tired of the fake smiles, tired of pretending I didn't notice how I was treated like a benchwarmer in my own family. But something changed around September. A quiet resolve. I'd been doing well at work, really well. I'd launched a side project that took off, got some decent investor attention, and suddenly, things started shifting. I didn't post about it, didn't tell anyone, just kept working, kept saving. And when I found out Darren had been renting a new BMW he couldn't really afford, something clicked. So when the Halloween invite came, with a note from my mom saying, "You should come. Darren and Kayla will be there," smiley face, I didn't say no. I told her I'd be there. Then I spent a little time planning. Now, I wasn't about to walk in with a tuxedo and a top hat like some Bond villain. That's not me. But I had an idea. I went as the Forgotten Son, suit jacket with frayed cuffs, name tag that said, "Hello, I'm nobody," and a beat-up briefcase I found at a thrift store. It was subtle, a little tongue-in-cheek. I figured no one would get it. That was fine. When I arrived, people barely looked up. The wine was flowing. Someone was dressed as Dracula, another as Cleopatra. Kayla was wearing some designer thing with feathers and glitter that made her look like a peacock on a runway. Darren, of course, showed up dressed like a Wall Street CEO, slicked back hair, fake cigar, and that signature smug grin. He had his Rolex on, the one he always showed off like it was an heirloom, and held out his car keys like they were made of gold. I tried to stay in the corner, nursing a soda and watching the room with quiet detachment. The music was loud, the fake laughter louder. But then Darren saw me. "James," he said, blinking dramatically. "Is that you?" He walked over, grinning like he'd found a stray dog. "Nice costume, bro," he added, loud enough that heads turned. "Did you come as a broke loser?" A few people chuckled. Kayla laughed like she'd rehearsed it. "Oh my God," she said, "that's hilarious." He totally did. I didn't react. Not visibly. I just smiled faintly and looked away. My parents were across the room, chatting with someone from their country club. My mom glanced at us, then quickly looked away. My dad kept sipping his wine. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it still stung. Even now, after all this time, part of me hoped someone would say something. That maybe they'd call Darren out. That maybe they'd tell Kayla to stop being cruel. But no one did. Because cruelty, when it's dressed up in humor and wealth, often gets mistaken for charm. Darren leaned in and whispered, "Didn't think you'd show up. Brave move, considering you probably Ubered here." Then he smirked. "Actually, I parked up front, right in the driveway. You probably saw it. The BMW. Just had it waxed." I said nothing, just sipped my soda and nodded. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, man. Not everyone's cut out for success. Some of us lead, others write code." He turned and walked off, laughing. Kayla blew me a kiss over her shoulder. I stood there for a moment, staring into my drink. My heart was pounding, not with sadness, but something else. Something colder, sharper. Not rage, not even bitterness. Just clarity. Like the part of me that had been waiting for them to change had finally shut off the lights and locked the door. And that's when the DJ, who apparently knew Darren from some mutual friend group, called him up to say a few words. Darren, never one to decline a spotlight, strutted up and started bragging about how hard he'd worked this year, how he grinded for everything, and how success didn't come easy. He looked directly at me mid-speech and said, "Some people just don't get it. They think being quiet is noble, but the world doesn't reward wallflowers." That's when the DJ, with perfect timing, passed me the mic. He gestured like it was a joke. "Hey, maybe the mysterious brother wants to say something." I took it. I don't know what came over me exactly, but I smiled. Not big, just enough. And I said, slowly, clearly, "Oh, by the way, that Rolex is fake. That BMW? It's mine. And so is the lease you've been lying about." People stopped moving. I let the silence hang, then added, "Enjoy the walk home, Romeo." The room went still. And that was only the beginning. If there's one thing I've learned about people like Darren, it's that they never expect consequences. They expect you to swallow the insult, laugh it off, and move on like it never happened. Because that's what you've always done. That's what they've always done. So when I dropped that truth bomb at the Halloween party, exposing his fake Rolex, claiming the BMW as mine, and hinting at the lease he was lying about, I knew exactly what I was doing. But what I didn't expect was how quiet it would get. It was the kind of silence that feels alive, like a held breath. The music hadn't even faded yet, but no one was dancing anymore. Even the DJ, who'd been nodding along a second ago, looked like he wanted to shrink behind his turntables. Darren stood frozen mid-smirk, still holding his drink like someone had hit pause on him. Kayla's mouth was open, and she blinked slowly, like she couldn't compute what just happened. My parents were on the other side of the room, wine glasses halfway to their lips, completely still. And me? I handed the mic back, nodded politely, and walked off the makeshift dance floor. I didn't make a scene. I didn't linger for reactions. I just walked back toward the kitchen, picked up a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter like I hadn't just set off a social hand grenade in the middle of my parents' living room. That's when the murmurs started. First in whispers, then in not-so-hushed tones. "Wait, that BMW? Did he say fake Rolex? Is he serious? Was Darren lying?" The house, once filled with curated laughter and light jazz, now buzzed with something heavier. Suspicion, curiosity, and just a little bit of long-overdue accountability. It took Darren about 3 minutes to regain his footing. He came stomping into the kitchen like a man looking for a fight, but trying to act like he wasn't. "You think that was funny?" he asked, loud enough that several people nearby pretended not to listen. I didn't answer right away, just sipped my water. Calm, steady, letting him stew. "Where do you get off embarrassing me like that?" he continued, voice tightening. "In front of everyone?" "I just told the truth," I said. "If that's embarrassing, maybe that's your problem." His eyes narrowed. You're lying. That car's mine. I didn't flinch. You used my name for the lease, Darren. You know it. I have the paperwork. His mouth opened, then closed. For a second, I thought he might swing. But Darren was too afraid of ruining the suit he hadn't paid for. So instead, he did what people like him always do. He deflected. He sneered. So what, you're jealous? You think pulling a stunt like that makes you better than me? No, I replied, setting my bottle down. But it does make me honest. And with that, I left him standing there and walked outside for some air. The cool October breeze hit me like a reset button. The party inside continued, but it had lost its glitter. People still mingled, but the energy was off. You could feel it, the shift. My phone buzzed. A text from my mom. We need to talk. Come back inside. Of course. Now it was my fault for disrupting the narrative. I took a deep breath and walked back in. My parents were waiting in the hallway near the stairs, flanked by 2 half-empty wine glasses and faces pulled taut with disapproval. My mom crossed her arms the moment she saw me. James, she said, voice clipped. What you did was completely inappropriate. I blinked. What I did? My dad stepped in, trying to play mediator. Son, we understand there are tensions between you and Darren, but humiliating him in front of all our guests. He humiliated me, I said, keeping my voice level. He's been doing it for years. You just never noticed. Or didn't care. My mom rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. You're being dramatic. Am I? I asked. He's been using my name to lease that car because his credit is shot. He flashes around a fake watch. He mocks me in front of you, and you laugh. Kayla treats me like a joke, and I say one sentence of truth, and I'm the problem. My dad shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the time or place. No, I said. There never is a time or place, is there? Because any time I speak up, it's inappropriate. But when Darren insults me, it's just joking. When he takes credit for things I've done, you smile. When I achieve something, it's ignored. But when he posts a selfie, you forward it to the entire family group chat. My mom's face went cold. James, this isn't the place to air all your grievances. Can we please just enjoy the evening without drama? I almost laughed. That's rich, considering Darren's costume was literally obnoxious Wall Street guy. We're asking you to apologize, my dad said, quieter now. Almost pleading. Just to smooth things over. No, I said flatly. My mom's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's best if you leave. And there it was. The ultimatum. Not directed at the one who lied, borrowed, insulted, but at the one who finally spoke. I nodded slowly. Fine. I walked past them, through the living room, and straight out the front door. No goodbyes. No drama. Just quiet. I didn't go home, though. I sat in my car, and stared at the windshield, heart racing. Not from anger. Not even sadness. But from something else. Something deeper. It felt like the final piece of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my whole life had finally clicked into place. They were never going to choose me. Not unless I forced them to see me. But I wasn't going to force anything anymore. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my dad and 1 long text from my mom. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but your behavior last night was selfish and childish. Darren is your brother. Family comes first. I expect you to do the right thing and apologize. He's very hurt, and you embarrassed all of us. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went for a walk. I didn't respond. Later that day, my cousin Erica, one of the few people in the family who doesn't pretend, called me. Dude, she said. That was legendary. I chuckled. Was it? Seriously. Everyone's talking about it. And not in a bad way. People are finally seeing through Darren's act. I paused. You think? Absolutely, she said. My dad told me he saw Darren arguing with Kayla in the driveway after you left. Something about the car. And then she stormed off, and he had to call an Uber. I raised an eyebrow. Wow. And get this, she continued, lowering her voice. Uncle Ray told me Darren tried to say you were just joking and that the car really was his. But when someone asked to see the registration, he changed the subject. I couldn't help but smile. Classic Darren. Erica paused. Hey, I know things are rough with your parents, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. That hit me harder than I expected. I thanked her, hung up, and sat with that for a while. Proud. It wasn't a word I heard often. Not from family. The following week, I got an email from the dealership confirming Darren had missed 2 payments on the lease. Since the lease was in my name. Thanks to some smooth talking he'd done back when I was naive enough to help, they were contacting me to resolve it. That was the moment I knew this story wasn't over. Not even close. It was just getting started. I thought the Halloween party was the turning point. But I was wrong. That was just the crack in the surface. A small rupture in the facade my family had spent decades painting over. The real fracture, the betrayal that would finally rip it all open, that came a few weeks later. And it didn't come from Darren. Not directly. It came from the people I still held out hope for. The people I wanted to believe were just blind, not cruel. It came from my parents. I remember the day clearly because it started out quiet. A rare Saturday morning where the city noise didn't pierce my windows too early, and I actually let myself sleep in for once. I'd made a fresh cup of coffee, had my laptop open on the kitchen counter, and was halfway through reading a proposal from a startup I'd been mentoring when I got the email. Subject: urgent notice, lease account status. My heart sank the moment I saw the subject line. When I opened it, it was worse than I expected. Dear James, as of November 17th, your BMW lease account is now 91 days past due. Immediate action is required to prevent repossession and further penalties. Please contact us within 72 hours. I stopped reading. 91 days. 3 months of missed payments. While Darren had been showing off that car, flashing those keys, and making me the punchline at a party he drove to in my name, he hadn't paid a cent. I'd only agreed to help him with the lease last spring, when he called me crying about how his job had cut his hours, and his credit score got nuked by a scammer. Back then, foolishly, I believed him. He said it would just be for 2 or 3 months, just to give him a leg up. I didn't even tell my parents, because I knew what they'd say. I was too soft, too naive. I always let Darren walk all over me. But what they never understood was that I wanted to believe he'd change, that he could be better, that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy for still wanting my brother to be something more than a flashy disaster. And now, not only had he defaulted, but my name, my credit, was on the line for it. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, called him. No answer. Called again, straight to voicemail. I sent him a single text. Call me. Now. An hour passed. Nothing. That's when I did something I should have done a long time ago. I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call first. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I just got in my car and drove the 40 minutes to their pristine little neighborhood with its trimmed hedges and HOA flyers taped to mailboxes. I parked at the curb. Their driveway was empty. Good. I didn't want an audience this time. My mom answered the door, still in a silk robe, holding a steaming mug of tea. She blinked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. James, she asked. What are you? I held up my phone. Where's Darren? She frowned. He's not here. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying, she said, stepping aside to let me in. He stayed the night a few days ago, but left yesterday. What's going on? I followed her into the kitchen. My dad was sitting at the table reading the newspaper, like it was 1953 and nothing bad had ever happened. He looked up and gave me that neutral, polite smile. James, he said, this is a surprise. I dropped the phone on the table, opened to the email. His smile faded. I want to know, I said, if either of you knew Darren hadn't been paying the lease. My mom set her mug down slowly. Lease? What lease? I laughed. The BMW lease. The one I co-signed for. The one he's now 3 months behind on. My dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. My mom's eyes darted between us. James, we didn't know. Darren didn't say anything about. Don't, I snapped. Don't do that. Don't pretend like he hasn't been coming here every week, playing house, letting you think he's some high roller. You really mean to tell me that in all the times he's shown up here, neither of you ever thought to ask where the money was coming from? Or whether he was paying his bills? She opened her mouth, closed it again. He said he was working things out. Working things out, I repeated, voice dripping with disbelief. And you believed him? My dad sighed. James, calm down. No, I'm done being calm, I said. This affects me, my credit, my future, and the fact that you've let him keep using me like this. We didn't let him, my mom said, voice rising for the first time. He's your brother. If you chose to help him, that was your decision. Don't blame us for that. That was the moment something in me snapped. You're right, I said, suddenly eerily calm. It was my decision. But you know what I find funny? I leaned in just slightly. If it were me who missed 3 months of payments, If it were me who lied and defaulted and risked someone else's financial future, you'd be tearing me apart right now. But because it's Darren, you're scrambling to shield him. Again, my dad finally spoke. Quiet, firm. James, that's enough. No, I said. It's not. I turned and left without another word. When I got home, I started making calls. I contacted the leasing company, explained the situation, and began the painful process of trying to sever the lease. A process that would likely cost me thousands just to clean up Darren's mess. Then, I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I went into my old Gmail account, the one I hadn't used in years, and I searched for the backup folder I'd made back when Darren borrowed my laptop to apply for jobs and forgot to log out of his email. I hadn't looked at those screenshots in over a decade, but they were all still there. Dozens of them. Emails between Darren and his friends where he bragged about cheating on past girlfriends. Messages where he laughed about borrowing money from the little bro and never paying it back. One where he literally wrote, "Dude, my parents treat him like a ghost. He'll do whatever I ask if I just pretend to be nice for 5 minutes." I never told anyone about those emails, because back then, I still believed he could grow up. That he would. But now I knew better. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a folder, labeled it Darren, Truth. Filled it with every document I had. The lease agreement, the dealership emails, the screenshots, even photos of the car with his plates on it, parked in my spot. Then I waited. 3 days later, I got a call from my dad. "James," he said, voice tight. "We need to talk. About. Your mother and I are concerned. Darren told us you're trying to sabotage him, that you threatened to ruin his credit and take his car." I stared at the wall. "He said you're going through something. That maybe this is stress-related. Or jealousy. Either way, we think you should come over and talk." I almost dropped the phone. "He what?" "He said you threatened him. That you were unstable. That maybe we should be worried about you." And that was the betrayal. The final, unforgivable blow. Not only had Darren lied, again, but he'd weaponized my parents against me. Turned them into tools in his little performance. And worse, they were believing him. I felt something icy crawl down my spine. A kind of detached anger. Not hot. Not loud. Cold. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply said, "Don't call me again." And I hung up. Then I opened the folder. And I started planning. They say the moment you hit rock bottom, something inside you shifts. That the pain becomes a sort of fuel, slow burning, dangerous, pure. I never really understood that before. I'd been hurt plenty. Overlooked. Dismissed. Mocked. But I'd never been betrayed like this. Not until my own parents called to tell me, in a quiet, patronizing voice, that they were concerned about my mental state. Because my brother told them to be. Because Darren, the same man who had used my name, trashed my credit, lied to my face, humiliated me at a party in front of strangers, still somehow managed to twist reality so tightly that they believed he was the victim. I didn't answer any more of their calls after that. I stopped responding to texts too. Even when my mom sent me a photo of our dog from childhood, Buddy, who now hobbled around the house with gray whiskers and a limp, with the caption, "He misses you. So do we." I wanted to scream. To throw my phone across the room. "He misses me? Or are you just using him as a leash?" But I didn't say anything. I just turned off notifications and went silent. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends, what was happening. There's something incredibly isolating about family betrayal, especially the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't leave bruises but still carves into your gut. It's not the kind of thing you bring up over drinks or during team lunches. "Hey, how's your week been?" "Oh, just getting gaslit by my entire bloodline." "Yours." So I let myself disappear for a bit. Went to work, did my job, came home. Repeat. The days blurred. The lease company kept calling. Eventually, I worked out a deal to return the car voluntarily, which would reduce the damage to my credit. But it'd still tank my score. I'd have to live with that for a while. Pay off the fees. Rebuild. I remember the day I handed over the keys. It was raining, cliché, I know. The rep at the dealership was kind enough. Said it happens more often than people think. That was supposed to be comforting. It wasn't. Watching them drive away in the car I'd never even used, the one Darren had paraded around in like a trophy while I took the bus to work most days. It felt like some strange kind of funeral. Not for the car, but for the version of me that still thought there was something to salvage in this family. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights off, rain tapping on the windows, and just broke. Not in the theatrical, crying on the floor way. That came later. This was quieter. I just sat there, staring at nothing, letting the weight of everything I'd swallowed over the years finally settle on my chest like a lead blanket. All the birthdays where Darren got what I asked for. All the times my parents told me to be the bigger person. Every joke at my expense that was laughed off. Every win I downplayed just to avoid being accused of bragging. Every apology I gave for things I didn't do. Every time I let myself believe that if I just kept being good, kept being quiet, eventually I'd be seen. I wasn't. And I wouldn't be. Not by them. That night, I didn't sleep. I made coffee at 3 a.m. and stared out the window at the wet streetlights. And somewhere around 4:12 a.m., something in my brain clicked. Not like a light bulb, but like a lock turning. I'm done. Not with my life. Not with the world. But with them. I wasn't going to beg for understanding. I wasn't going to prove my side of the story. I wasn't going to spend another minute trying to explain myself to people who had made up their minds years ago about who I was allowed to be. So I started deleting photos. Old family albums from Google Drive. Text threads with my mom that always ended in guilt trips. Voicemails from my dad's number that I knew were just Darren using his phone. I unfollowed them on social media. Archived the emails. Deleted the group chat. And then I got to work. I dug back into the Darren Truth folder. Opened a spreadsheet. Created categories. Financial documents. Lease paperwork. Screenshots of conversations. Emails from his old account. Witness statements. People who'd seen him use the car, brag, etc. Recorded voicemails. Ones where he thanked me for saving his ass. It started to feel therapeutic. Not vengeful. Not yet. Just clear. Like I was organizing the chaos into something solid. Something real. And as I worked, I realized something important. Darren didn't just lie to me. He lied to everyone. Business partners. Girlfriends. Friends of friends. Co-workers who only existed in his stories. He built a reputation on top of a hollow core, and he was still standing, only because no one had ever pulled the curtain back. Not yet. But I wasn't ready for revenge. Not then. First, I needed to clean my own house. I scheduled a call with a financial advisor. Explained the situation honestly, the lease, the missed payments, the damage. We mapped out a 3-year plan. Hard, but doable. I called my bank. Opened a new account under a new email. Canceled the joint savings account I'd opened years ago when my parents insisted it would be smart for emergencies. Darren had access. That was over now. I pulled my credit report. Filed disputes. Set up credit monitoring. I also started going to therapy. Found a guy named Mark through my company's EAP. He wore Hawaiian shirts, let me curse when I needed to, and didn't try to fix me in the first 5 sessions. Just let me unravel. Let me speak the truths I'd swallowed for too long. I feel like they don't see me unless I'm a mirror, I told him once. He tilted his head. And what happens when you stop reflecting what they want? I disappear, I said. He nodded. Or, you finally become you. It stuck with me. I started journaling. Not the corny Dear Diary stuff. Just stream of consciousness rants and questions and lists of things I wanted to say, but never did. Pages and pages of grief. Rage. Regret. Clarity. Things like, I wasn't quiet. You just weren't listening. Why did being a good son always mean being a silent one? I don't hate you. I just stopped needing you. The truth was, I didn't miss them. Not in the way I thought I would. What I missed was the idea of them. The potential. The hypothetical version of my family where love wasn't conditional on performance. Where Darren wasn't a black hole that sucked all the attention and empathy out of the room. But that version didn't exist. And I wasn't going to keep bleeding myself dry to pretend it did. Still, despite everything I was doing, the rebuilding, the healing, a part of me still watched. Quietly, carefully, because I knew Darren wasn't done. He didn't know how to walk away. Not from a mark. Not from a resource. Not from someone who still had the receipts. And he had no idea what I was planning. But he would. Soon. The first thing I noticed when I stopped trying to be accepted was how much quieter life became. Not lonely, just quiet. Still. The kind of stillness that lets you hear your own thoughts again, like stepping out of a noisy club and realizing the ringing in your ears was drowning out your instincts. For the first time in years, I wasn't juggling emotional landmines or bracing for a passive-aggressive jab at dinner. I didn't have to be the good son, or the mature one, or the family tech support who fixed things for free in exchange for crumbs of approval. I just got to be James. And James, as it turned out, was doing pretty damn well. Work was steady, but the real game changer was the side project, a cloud-based workflow tool I'd built over nights and weekends. It started as something small, just a way to automate daily tasks for a few freelance clients. But word spread, quietly, organically. One of those clients recommended me to a friend who happened to be connected to a mid-tier VC firm. Within a month, I had an email in my inbox asking if I'd ever considered scaling the product for wider SaaS use. That email changed everything. By January, I'd partnered with a small dev team. By February, we had a beta. And by March, we had our first seed investor, someone who didn't care about Darren or my parents or what car I drove. They just saw potential. And for once, so did I. I didn't brag about it. I didn't post announcements on Facebook or send group texts. I learned my lesson. Some things grow better in silence. Still, word got out. People talk. And my success became a whisper that reached places I didn't expect, including my family. It started with small, almost laughable attempts at reconnection. My dad sent me a clipped email. Hope you're doing well. Saw your name mentioned on a site. Impressive work. Maybe we could grab lunch sometime. No apology. No mention of the lease, or Darren, or the way they doubted my sanity just a few months ago. Just a friendly, let's pretend nothing happened kind of email. I didn't respond. A week later, my mom called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail about missing our talks and how life is too short to hold grudges. This from the woman who once told me I was too sensitive for being hurt when Darren lied to my face, and she laughed. Delete. Darren, though, Darren came at it sideways. First through Kayla. She followed me on LinkedIn. I almost laughed when I saw the notification. Then, out of nowhere, Darren texted me. Darren, hey man, heard you're doing great stuff. Seriously proud of you. Crazy what you've built. Let's catch up soon. I stared at the message for a long time. 3 months ago, this man told my parents I was mentally unstable and trying to sabotage him. Now he wanted to catch up? Nope. But I didn't block him. Not yet. Because Darren had no idea what I was building behind the scenes. And I wanted him to keep looking over his shoulder, wondering when the floor might give way. Meanwhile, things with the app, now officially branded as Nestline, were exploding. We got featured in a niche productivity newsletter. Then a YouTube channel did a walkthrough of our interface and called it a hidden gem. That week, we doubled signups. Feedback started pouring in. So did feature requests. And then, the big one. A mid-sized consulting firm reached out about licensing the software for internal use. 5 figures. One deal. I signed it with a shaking hand. I wasn't just recovering from what Darren did. I was building something stronger than anything he could fake. And while all of this was happening, while my real life was blooming like spring after a brutal winter, his world started to crack. I didn't have to lift a finger. Kayla dumped him. Apparently after finding out about the lease fiasco and realizing the BMW lifestyle was built on lies. My cousin Erica texted me about it. She threw his clothes onto the lawn. Literal lawn. Like in the movies. I said nothing, but a part of me smiled. The part of me that remembered Kayla calling me the family IT guy, like I was some unpaid intern. Then, in early April, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't family. It was Angela Fields, an editor at a medium-sized tech blog who had heard about Nestline from one of our beta users. Would you be open to doing a feature? She asked. Just a short profile. About your journey. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted attention. But she added something that caught me. I think a lot of people would resonate with the story of someone who came from underdog beginnings. Overlooked. Doubted. Building in the background while everyone else is loud. That felt right. So I agreed. The article went live 2 weeks later. It was tasteful. Honest. It mentioned my early freelance work. The pivot into SaaS. The bootstrap mindset. It didn't name my family. Didn't mention Darren. But it did reference something I said during our interview. Sometimes being underestimated is your greatest asset. They don't see you coming. Apparently, that line stuck. Because a few days later, I got another text from Darren. Darren, so you're doing interviews now? Guess you forgot who helped you back when you had nothing. I stared at the message, stunned by the audacity. Who helped me? This was the man who used me, mocked me, defaulted on a lease in my name. I didn't respond. But now I knew for sure. He was unraveling. And fast. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Nestline secured a second round of funding. I was invited to speak at a panel. I hired 2 developers full-time. My name, once a joke at parties, was now on articles that strangers read. And Darren? He went quiet, which, ironically, is how I knew he was planning something. Because Darren never lets someone else have the spotlight for too long. Not without a comeback. Not without finding a way to leech from it. And sure enough, just as I was starting to breathe, just as the light at the end of the tunnel felt safe, I got an email from a legal office. Subject: Asset and business dispute. Inquiry into shared property rights. My stomach dropped. I opened the email. It was vague. Just a request for a meeting regarding an ongoing matter involving a family claim to early-stage equity distribution. I knew exactly what this was. Darren was trying to claim he was owed a stake in Nestline, and he'd lawyered up. I closed the email, sat back, and smiled, because this was the mistake I'd been waiting for. The moment where Darren tried to turn whispers into lawsuits. The moment I could finally go public. But not yet. Not until I had every document in place. Every message archived. Every thread tied off. Because when I make my move, it won't be loud. It'll be quiet. Surgical. I won't just destroy his lies. I'll leave him standing in the ruins of them. I didn't reply to the lawyer's email immediately. I read it 3 times, slowly, like a chess player studying the board after a flashy opponent made their move. Darren always moved fast. He'd bluff, stall, manipulate, throw 10 lies into the room, and hope no one noticed he never had a plan beyond the next 5 minutes. But this was desperation dressed in a suit. The email claimed Darren had contributed foundational input and resources in the early stages of product development, and thus believed he was entitled to equity, financial compensation, or both. It was so vague, so intentionally murky, I had to laugh. Darren didn't even know what Nestline did. I once overheard him describe it as that app for spreadsheets, or whatever, and now he was claiming he helped build it? It was exactly the mistake I'd been waiting for. See, I didn't want revenge that looked like revenge. I wanted receipts. I wanted Darren to step forward, on record, and claim ownership of something he couldn't define, while I had emails, code commits, contracts, timestamped prototypes, bank statements, NDAs, and an airtight legal paper trail going back 2 years. I scheduled a Zoom call with his lawyer for the following week. Before the meeting, I called my own attorney, Melissa. She was sharp, quiet, and had a dry sense of humor I appreciated. I sent her everything. The lease documents. The emails where Darren admitted to missing payments. The screenshots from his old Gmail where he bragged about manipulating me. The voicemail where he called Nestline James' nerdy little project. She reviewed it all and said, if he wants to go to court, let him. I'll bring popcorn. We prepared a formal cease and desist in case he pushed harder. But I had something better in mind. The Zoom call was on a Monday morning. I wore a plain hoodie. Looked calm. Normal. Darren didn't show. His lawyer, a man named Trent, looked like he walked straight out of a catalog. Expensive watch, 2 white teeth, and that empty confidence that suggested he hadn't read past page 2 of the documents Darren gave him. Mr. Fields believes he's entitled to compensation or a minority stake in Nestline, Trent said smoothly, based on the fact that the initial idea was discussed during collaborative exchanges between the two of you. I cut him off. I'd like to know the date of that conversation. Trent blinked. Excuse me. You said the idea was discussed between us. When was that? He flipped through notes. My client mentioned early 2023. I launched the first private beta in 2022. I have commit logs, timestamped prototypes, and user feedback dating back a year before your client ever knew the name Nestline. I also have texts from Darren calling it James' nerdy little app and asking if he could use the login to impress a girl. Trent blinked again. Well, and, I continued, I have email correspondence from him in March of last year asking for money because he said, and I quote, "You're doing well now, and I'm drowning." Not exactly the words of a co-founder, right? Silence. I'll send you the documents, I said. All of them, along with a cease and desist. If Darren makes any more claims, public or private, we'll move to litigation. And I promise you, the discovery process will not be kind. Trent cleared his throat. I think we may have been misinformed. I think you absolutely were, I said. And if you want to save face, I suggest you advise your client to drop this before it gets embarrassing. The call ended 5 minutes later. I never heard from Trent again. But I wasn't done. Darren had spent years branding himself as a flashy entrepreneur. His Instagram was a highlight reel of someone else's money, staged photos in front of rented cars, fake watches, overpriced brunches, motivational quotes that sounded like they were scraped from a stock image poster. I didn't need to expose him. He already had. I just needed to light the match. Remember that tech blog interview I did? The one that quoted me saying, "Sometimes being underestimated is your greatest asset." Turns out it got picked up by a few industry newsletters. And one of them, a particularly snarky startup gossip Substack, reached out to me for a follow-up piece. They weren't just interested in the product. They were interested in the story. "You've been through quite a journey," the editor said. "Ever think about telling the whole thing? Not in a petty way, just the truth." I hesitated. Then I said yes. The article that came out was titled, "How I Built a Startup While My Own Family Bet Against Me." It wasn't a hit piece. I was careful. I never mentioned Darren by name. But I told the story, how I loaned my brother my name to lease a car, how he defaulted, how my credit was trashed, how my parents believed him when he said I was unstable, how I rebuilt anyway, quietly, patiently, successfully. I included a quote that I knew would sting. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that some people only love the version of you that makes them look better. The story went viral, at least in startup circles. And 2 days after it dropped, I got a message from Kayla. Yes, that Kayla. "Kayla, hey, just read your article. I didn't know how bad things were. I'm really sorry for the way I treated you. You didn't deserve it." I didn't reply, because closure doesn't always need a conversation. A week later, Darren posted a cryptic story on Instagram. A blurry shot of a legal documents folder on his laptop, captioned, "Everyone's a victim these days." No one commented. The likes were few. And then, the account went dark. Turns out, when your whole persona is built on lies, and someone shines a light on the cracks, it doesn't take much for the whole thing to crumble. Darren's reputation tanked. People he owed money to came forward. One of his old friends, a guy I remembered from high school, messaged me to say, "You know, I always wondered how he afforded that lifestyle. Should have known it was built on other people's backs." But I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just kept building. Nestline grew. We landed 2 more enterprise clients. I moved into a better apartment. Started seeing someone, not serious yet, but healthy, for the first time. I went to therapy. Took walks. Learned how to say no without explaining myself. And then, on a sunny Thursday in June, I got a text from an unknown number. "Unknown, it's Mom. Can we talk? Your dad's not doing well. Darren's in a bad place. I miss you. Please." I stared at the message. Then I closed my phone. Because healing doesn't mean reopening the wound. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's disconnection. It's walking away. Quietly. Calmly. While they finally feel the silence they always forced you to sit in. I waited 3 days before I wrote back. Not because I was being dramatic. Not even because I needed time to think. I just wanted to make sure that when I finally responded, it wasn't from a place of anger or guilt. I'd already spent too much of my life being reactive, being the one who flinched first, who forgave before anyone even asked. But I wasn't that version of James anymore. When I finally replied, it was short, not cruel, not cold, just final. "I'm sorry to hear that Dad's unwell. I hope he gets the care he needs. But I won't be coming back. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, and I can't risk reopening wounds that never healed in the first place. I wish you peace, but I found mine elsewhere." She never replied. And for the first time, that silence felt like freedom, not punishment. Over the next year, Nestline went from promising to profitable. We expanded internationally. I hired a small but brilliant team, people who didn't care about my past or who my family was. People who respected me for who I was now. I gave a TED-style talk at a startup summit. Talked about resilience, about quiet success, about how the people who say family comes first are often the ones who expect you to come last. It resonated. Strangers came up to me afterward, eyes misty, telling me they'd gone through something similar. That my story helped them set boundaries. Say no. Walk away. And one day, on the anniversary of the Halloween party, almost exactly 1 year after Darren mocked me in front of a room full of people, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a Rolex. Fake, of course. Wrapped around a crumpled note. "You win. I hope you're happy." There was no signature. I didn't need one. I dropped the watch into the trash, tossed the box, and went back to my desk. Outside my office window, the city pulsed with life, full of noise, movement, chaos. But in that moment, I felt still, anchored. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped trying to prove myself to people who were never rooting for me to begin with. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't loud. It's not petty. It's not dramatic. It's a quiet life, lived on your own terms. Unapologetic, unbothered, unreachable. And that's exactly what I built.
Ta-da! Look at my collection. Look at my books. My books, my pretty, pretty books. Aren't they so pretty? Favorite book? A series I really like is these three. It's a trilogy. It's called Once Upon a Broken Heart. It's definitely a big one for me, I feel like. I haven't read this one yet. I need to read this one. Honestly, jealous. I only have 3 of them. Get some. This one's really pretty. This one's like a mermaid. Wait, let me show you. Like, the art is so pretty, guys. Can you see that with the foiling? Like, oh my goodness.